Hey, everybody, this is Jimmy. Welcome back to another episode of the Jimmy Tingle Show. We are so excited today. We have Chris Farone, ladies and gentlemen. He is from the Boston Institute of Nonprofit Journalism. He is from Queens, New York. Round of applause for Queens, brothers and sisters. Queens, New York native who came to New England in 2004 to earn a master's degree in journalism at Boston University. Round of applause, Boston University. Chris Faraone is the editor and co-publisher of DigBoston and a co-founder of the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. I want to find out all about the Boston Institute of Nonprofit Journalism. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Welcome the one, the only, originally from Queens, now Boston-based, Mr. Chris Faraone. How are you, Chris?
I'm great. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I know it's a mouthful. So, we just say BINJ for short. I even have it tattooed on my knuckles. Got a whole story behind. Yeah, one of our early funders, I had been writing for the Phoenix where, we were like everybody else at the time. I was a staff writer at the Boston Phoenix before it went out of business. And, the guy, this is a big funder from the Midwest and said, you have a career. How do I know you're not going to just, run off and, do the solo stuff and that you're really committed to doing this project? And so I got it tattooed on my knuckle. So I had to do it. And here we are 7 years later. And here we are talking. And you were actually one of the early supporters too. We did a show early on, just like this, and Humor for Humanity, and it was fantastic. So I appreciate the callback.
Of course, Chris. That was a lot of fun. We did that one at the Sanders Theater. So, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you back. I'm really impressed with what you're doing. First of all, just explain to people, what is the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism, and how does it differ than, say, the Globe, the Herald, these other NPR, et cetera?
Yeah. So, BINJ, we kind of see it when we, and it's similar to when we started. It's similar mission, which is we're kind of like a free-floating entity. As everybody is aware, I think the media is hardly what it used to be. So, we can barely get local news. We got communities like Cambridge and Somerville, cities of 80, 90, 100,000 people that don't even have anyone who covers City Hall, let alone, a full newspaper, a full newsroom. It's a thing of the past, sadly. So we work with various publications to do articles that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Many of them are investigative in nature. That was certainly why we started. Even just this week, we did a big investigation, and we've been covering this kind of stuff for a while, into surveillance in Boston. Piece ran in the Bay State Banner and also in DigBoston. So for people who may be familiar with ProPublica at the national level, they work with outlets like the New York Times. We're a much smaller, very grassroots, local, although we cover issues across Massachusetts. The capital's right here in Boston, so we cover the State House, of course. And we work with outlets, independent outlets across the state. We're working with an outlet called The Shoestring in Western Mass right now on a story. And basically, so, I like a regional ProPublica in that every relationship is different. Some outlets have a reporter, but don't have the funding to pay that reporter extra. Some outlets don't have the reporter. Some outlets need to talk to an attorney. We connect them with an attorney. So really, just this resource center. We've also helped start similar nonprofits across the country, small bootstrap nonprofits, some of them aligned with alt weeklies like we are here in Boston with the Dig, but some of them just really starting their own thing with their own new model. We just kind of help people get off the ground. Sometimes there's like no one to call.
Right. So, Chris, let me ask you, for example, when you say you partner with other newspapers, established newspapers, would somebody like the Bay State Banner hire you to do a particular story, or the Globe or the Herald or whatever, or would you do the story and then pitch that story to these existing platforms?
Great question. So, so as far as the Globe and the Herald are concerned, they're really, first of all, they're both behind paywalls. And this is one of the big problems with journalism and access to journalism as far as we're concerned. So I'm not here to, trash them. They both do great work, of course. I also have issues with some of the work they do. But nevertheless, we're in a different space than those outlets. And there are nonprofits like ProPublica that work with outlets that are behind paywalls. It's kind of against our mission. Our idea is to work with outlets like the Banner that are not behind paywalls and are also that are really more locally and community based. And as for our relationships, they're always different. Sometimes like a newspaper like El Planeta in Spanish has come to us and said, we have this investigation, we need the resources. But this more recent piece, it actually kind of came through at the last minute because we were able to have some impact before a Boston City Council meeting. And so we kind of just said to partners, hey, is that who wants to run this? We gave them a day's notice, and the banner and the Dig picked it up. But really, it's always different. We're malleable, and that's the important thing. And we never go with our hand out. We don't ask for money from these partners. The funding comes in from the public, and we work with these outlets that, like we said, otherwise probably couldn't afford to do a lot of this heavy lifting in today's media landscape.
Okay, so you are donation based then.
Yeah,
The people, your readers, your subscribers, you're completely donation based. So if you wrote an article, if you wanted to cover something at City Hall and you would put up the resources, you would pay the reporters to do it and all that, you would get it up on your platform, and then you would say to these platforms, you can access this. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, and and we'll have a relationship ahead of time. Also, sometimes we'll partner with a national publication. We had some major impact last year. Writing about rodenticides, things that are used to kill rodents that also end up killing bald eagles and other species. We published that with Salon, and so yeah, sometimes it's a national partner. We also sometimes partner with other alternative newspapers around the country to show how the same issue, say prisons, is playing out in different places. So there's really the sky's the limit, and this is kind of the new way. You got to figure it out somehow, because the ad dollars, the way they used to stack, it's a different world. So the nonprofit, we've been doing it for a while, and we were one of the first to kind of do it this way, but there were people doing it before us. There's places like the New England Center for Investigative Reporting. They're based out of GBH now, and that's great, and they really do great work. But we really have more of a grassroots approach. We work with freelancers. This year we'll cut checks to more than 50 freelancers, and many of them have regular jobs. But this is the kind of work that you're not going to do it on your own if there's no compensation, there's no recognition. Even if it's just a little bit, couple $100 or $1,000, it's something, and it keeps people motivated. And I wish I could save journalism, one $65,000 a year job at a time. It's just not happening right now. But at the least, we could do these important stories, often that have significant impact.
Right. And so would you say that what separates you from NPR or the Globe, the Herald, or whoever, is that I believe they're nonprofits as well. Isn't the Globe and the Herald technically nonprofits? Or
no, the Globe and the Herald are both. Or the Herald's owned by this giant company through another company and a Japanese bank, and the Boston Globe's owned by John Henry. It's a private business. Okay. They do work with some nonprofit. They do some nonprofit collaborations, but that's different. As for NPR, those are and PBS, of course. GBH here in Boston is one of the biggest NPR and PBS affiliates in the country. And I don't want people to see this as a separate thing. We have a media ecosystem here, and I could go on and on. There's literally dozens of reporters who have come through the doors of the Dig and have worked with BINJ that are now everywhere, from ProPublica, like Emily Hopkins, who started with BINJ, and the Dig, to people who wrote their first features with us that are now at WBUR, at GBH, at the Globe, at the Washington Post. So, I just think, I hate to call us the farm team, because the work that we put out, I think, is, as great as work that comes out in big papers like the Globe. But at the same time, we are developing a lot of that talent. And locally, we even do workshops. We teach community members how to make media. This is something that in this day and age, it might not always be professionalized the way it used to be, but there are a lot of people who have the tools, maybe even went to school for it or didn't, but have the chops to do the research, that we activate them as much as possible.
Right. And how important is it to you? Because I used to work at 60 Minutes. I think you know that. And I know you have a degree in journalism. And when you were coming up through journalism, you couldn't just go with a feeling and put it out there as news. I mean, that one of the biggest problems we have in the media landscape right now is I don't know what the fact checking is for everybody, but the accountability is virtually non-existent. People say things all the time on television and radio that are not necessarily true, but there's no accountability. So how important is it to you to get the story right before you go to publication?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a critical thing, and also a legal issue for a lot of the work that we do. But I also say that I don't want to dodge the question, but we're in a kind of fortunate position in that with the long form stuff, at least, we are able to actually sit back and watch a lot of those mistakes get made. And when our reporting encompasses that media criticism, often not always directly, but we're able to say, that all the this arrest happened and all the media coverage said this one thing. Now we know it was the opposite, and reporters listened to the police who had lied, or whatever the story is. So that that's always kind of been the tradition, whether it was the Boston Phoenix, Village Voice, of alternative media before that word was hijacked by the alt-right. Nevertheless, when we do this long form journalism, a lot of these stories that we're putting out, not that we're just bragging about length, but 3, 5, 7,000 words, and with historic context. So I think people really do appreciate these are articles that don't go away. They're not here one day and gone the next. Some of our articles still that have been published years ago get more than 1,000 views a week on some of the sites they were distributed from. And I think that's a testament to the work that we're doing. It's thorough. So a lot of it has infographics attached to it. It's something that you may not be able to read on one sitting, more book-like, but it's a resource that people go to for years. And that's, for us, that's what it's about. They say we're writing the first draft of history. Like to do a little bit better than that, maybe second or third,
Right. Well, Michael Moore was one of the few voices coming up in the recent midterms that was saying, don't believe what you're reading about the polls. Don't believe in this automatic red wave that's going to crush the Democrats. And I remember reading, I subscribed to his newsletter, and I would get his emails, and he was saying, things are going to be much better for the Democrats than that is being reported in the, quote, mainstream media. And I'm saying, okay, let's see what happens. Turns out he was right. And I wonder if you guys were covering the midterms at all leading up to that. And did you have a similar take on what might happen?
Well, a few things. So we, as far as elections, mostly, we cover state and local elections. So I had my own, my own ideas. Yeah. But as for Michael Moore, he actually, I got to say, he participates every 4 years. This is what we do when it comes to politics. Every 4 years, BINJ rents out the Shaskeen pub in Manchester, New Hampshire during the primary for the week leading up to it. And we provide a free beer and free workspace and internet for whether it's Jimmy Tingle or any independent reporter up there who is not part of this. Remember how 60 Minutes has like a whole room at the Ramada across the street? Anyway, so Michael Moore actually did his podcast at our newsroom last time. But yeah, I mean, for me, I don't really believe any of it. I can't stand horse race politics. When we do go up there, when we do bring reporters to New Hampshire, we actually, last time we do this thing where we ask people what kind of issues they would like covered. And you hear things that you never see. People wanted to hear about the nuclear plant up in Seabrook. People wanted to hear about issues that just never come up. And it sounds cliche when I say it, but it's true. It's not the chicken or the egg. It's the media feeding people a lot of stuff that they don't even necessarily want. And of course, Jimmy, as a former candidate yourself, that politics in Massachusetts, nothing else really applies. We're kind of in our own little bubble here. Republicans barely exist. And I don't know if that's always for a great thing. So I guess my real answer is that I was really busy wondering what the next 4 years in Massachusetts are going to be like without a single Republican in charge. I know that a lot of Democrats are celebrating, but it's going to be interesting as a reporter. I don't see any reason anybody would ever answer a FOIA request, for example, when all their colleagues in government will back them up on not responding, which has always kind of been the case anyway. But at least, we had Charlie Baker in there or Mitt Romney as a foil. So that's where I was. Electorally, that's where I've been thinking.
Right. Tell me, how are you guys doing in terms of, is the digital platform, you're solely digital, you're not doing anything, you're not doing hard copies now, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So how is that working for you in terms of financing? Are you be able to keep your head above water? Is everybody getting paid? Do you see, how's it going? Well, I know you're not getting paid, but is everybody else getting paid?
Right. Well, with the, thanks to BINJ, we're able to do the long form stuff and, and get money in the pockets of people, including us. We work on a contract basis. So if I'm working on a story, with the dig, truth is without printing, it's less of a risk. And by the way, so people know, we never had a lack of readership. Print cost, and some people know this, actually went up 40 to 50%. So when we were still putting more than 35,000 newspapers out. So it's not easy, but thanks to weed, thanks to cannabis being recreational weed in Massachusetts, that's been a huge outlet for us. We've been covering it for years. And we have a partner publication called Talking Joints Memo. So basically, we make it work. I will say, as for, entertainment's always the tough stuff, whether it's, comedy, music, arts, we support all that, we cover it, but it makes us no money. There's no advertising in that realm the way it used to be. If you used to, look at a Boston Phoenix from the 1980s, and also restaurants, every new restaurant that opened, every club, they had to have ads every week. It just doesn't work like that anymore. So we were done complaining about it a while ago. That's why we started a nonprofit. That's why we do, a lot of cannabis reporting. We kind of just look for solutions instead of trying to beat the old drum. And we still do have the locals that do support us. Holiday time, if you go to the Dig, you'll see all sorts of ads for the theater districts. We still get some of that. People know we can still put some butts in seats. So we're still good for that. So, we're kind of old school. We have a lot of that old Phoenix readership too, but we play along on social media as well. And certainly have a lot of young readers. So, as long as we can keep it going, of course, the investigative stuff is what's most important to me. No matter what I always said with BINJ, with the nonprofit, if we raise $2,000, we'll do $2,000 worth of journalism. If we raise $2 million, we'll do $2 million worth of journalism. That's what I'm here for.
That's the spirit. Yeah. That's the spirit, Chris. People should never underestimate the impact that alternative media has and has had in this country, and especially in this town. The Boston Phoenix broke the Catholic Church clergy scandal years before. Yeah, I mean, during the 80s, and my friend Barry Cremens was a victim of sexual abuse, not clergy abuse, but sexual abuse. And he was among the first people, to come out publicly on that. And he wrote a big article, I believe, in the Phoenix. But they've been always on the cutting edge of new ideas, new insights into what's happening. So it's a huge asset for the region, and it's a huge asset. Ultimately, some of these stories are picked up nationally and become life-changing stories. For example, I think we were saying ProPublica, weren't they the people that broke the story about the Roe decision?
Yeah, they had the leaks. I mean, ProPublica breaks so much stuff; it's unbelievable. I mean, they're a great example of they're able to free floating incubator. We look up to them, and certainly people from ProPublica have given us a lot of tips over the years on how to make this happen. And I'll just say, this year we did more than 50 features, and if you look at those, a lot of them are ones that people have heard about, maybe not directly through us, but that have trickled out, whether about surveillance. When it comes to prisons and parole, often we're the only people covering big issues. It used to be that so much was covered. Now there's so many holes in the media. We're just trying to fill as many as possible.
Great. So, Chris, for folks who are watching and listening, they rely on donations. So if people want to donate, or if people want to read your articles, first of all, where do they go? What's the URL for the website?
BINJ Online, BINJ online.org. And you can just look up Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. We're everywhere. If you want to just go to the shortcut, give to BINJ, give to BINJ.org. That's the donation link. But now that you've heard of us, you'll say, "Oh yeah, I know those. I know them. I see that pop up." And that's kind of the idea. We want to be in the fabric of the community.
Okay. And what about DigBoston? Where do you find that?
DigBoston.com, and also on all socials. And I appreciate all the support. And yeah, we say, when you support independent journalism, you kind of support all of your favorite causes at one time. I know it's hard to say, wow, there's all these, other really important causes. For us, I can't stress enough that a lot of these people, a lot of these institutions, whether it's homelessness or immigrants, they don't have publicists. So it takes people like us to report on these communities.
Chris Farone, thank you so much for joining us today. Continued success. You're in the You're in the spirit of Mark Twain and what's his name? Mencken. What's his first name? H.L. Mencken, and all the muckrackers throughout history who have beat the bushes and got the stories and brought attention to important things that are happening that aren't always reported in the mainstream. And you're doing it out of a love of journalism and a passion for the truth. So our hats are off to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jimmy.